Hi, everybody, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our session on advocating for languages teaching in your school. For those of you who've not been to one of our CPD sessions before, I'm Bethan McHugh, and I'm the languages content lead at Twinkl. And I'm joined this afternoon by two fantastic colleagues. We've got Katie, who is in charge of subject leads here at Twinkl. So she's going to talk from a subject lead perspective and how her team can support you with advocating for your subject. And Maz, who is from the languages team, who herself is an experienced leader, and she will be talking about the subject perspective and how you can really push for languages, things that she's come across in the past, and some of her insights and some ideas on how to really promote languages in your school. So a huge thank you to both Katie and Maz for joining me, and I think their insights are going to be really useful, because for those of you who've joined these before, it's quite nice to hear somebody else talking who's not me. So that's probably my main thing. And also, if we have time, I'd like to show you our scheme, our curriculum scheme, Lightning Languages, and how we believe really strongly that this scheme is ideal for helping you advocate for languages and really successfully developing and establishing languages within your school. So I just want to talk very generally before I chat to my colleagues about advocating for your subject and what that might mean in different circumstances, because it will mean different things for different people. But fundamentally, we want to remember what that is about our key aims, which is obviously broadening horizons, pushing to develop pupils' curiosity and developing their understanding of the world. And that is, regardless of where we're teaching, even if we're not following the English national curriculum and we're teaching in Wales, Scotland, or Ireland, or anywhere else, fundamentally, all our curricula are focusing on the same thing here, which is focusing on broadening people's horizons. So that's what we want to think about. And when we're thinking about advocating for languages and why it's important, it's worth bearing that in our minds, because, you know, while as languages teachers, you might be thinking about the content of your lessons and your curriculum, actually, when we're talking about advocating for the subject and within the wider school community, we need to think about the core elements that need to be promoted. And this is probably the most important aspect, regardless of where we're teaching, really. So the sorts of things that, you know, we might need to advocate for, and this may vary significantly depending on the profile, the existing profile of languages in your school, and any support you may or may not already have. In some cases, it might be as simple as advocating for teaching time. You might have very, very limited teaching or indeed preparation time, and it might be really difficult to actually get that embedded on the curriculum. I remember once doing a transition project for a local secondary school where I went into the cluster primary schools that all fed into that secondary school. I remember going in to teach French one afternoon to year 6, and I walked into the classroom and there were no chairs or tables in there. All the desks had been removed for an event elsewhere. So all the children were on the floor and they just didn't have anything. So we had to kind of teach a whole lesson with no kind of formal classroom setup. And that was kind of one of those things that was sort of, you know, this is really pushing for the, you know, languages were seen as, oh, they don't need desks and chairs, it's absolutely fine. And yeah, it's quite an extreme example, but it is, you know, something that happens. So if there's the school fete, the same I found, I'd go in and I'd be teaching a lesson, but it would be, oh, actually, nobody's here. All the year 6s are helping with the school fete today. They can't come and do French. And it's those sorts of things. So it's actually advocating for that and promoting those sorts of things. You know, the practicalities, the logistics of languages may be one issue in your school. If that's sorted, there may be other areas that you have to think of, and that might be assembly time or in order to raise the whole school profile. So some time that you might have with yourself or to set up some language ambassadors to go in and actually do something for languages for the school, you know, ideally around European Day of Languages, International Mother Language Day, or some of those sorts of events, or if French is a language in your school, Bastille Day, for example, or you know, those sorts of events that you could be celebrating and talking about. It may be a case of really advocating for resourcing, because that might be something that you're really lacking. And, you know, it could be as simple as staffing or subject specialisms, because if you're the languages lead and you may well have class teachers teaching the subject, or TAs or HLTAs who were not experienced linguists, it can be really nerve-wracking to be delivering that language. So you may well be having to fight for that. Trips is obviously high, would be a nice dream for us all. And I'm not talking about trips necessarily to France or to Spain or to Germany or anywhere like that. But, it could be as simple as if you've got, a module on Mexico, that you visit a local Mexican restaurant, or you can visit a restaurant and taste the cuisine and those sorts of things. So it's that kind of trip I'm talking about, really, or, thinking about ways that you can develop a culture in that respect. It may well be some transition support is what's really lacking. This is something we see an awful lot from our primary teachers, which is that they feel they're working in isolation from other schools that also feed into that secondary school where their children are going, and they're not entirely sure what the end point should be. So it might be needing to push for that level of support, or it could be down to pushing for CPD time that you need. You may want to start introducing a language earlier in your school, and you may want to fight for some key stage 1 or EYFS time, or you may want some support to set up some clubs or some extracurricular activities. And simply, as I said, just coming down to the prioritization of languages. Where does it sit in the ranking? It's a curriculum subject all across the UK, but it isn't, because there isn't that fixed endpoint, or there aren't SATs or those sorts of things, and we're just looking to make a kind of non-specific level of progress. The prioritization of languages can dip quite significantly for many schools at different points of the year. So it is fighting for those sorts of things. So it's bearing that in mind. So if you're taking on subject leadership, it's often more than just delivering a subject. You might be lucky that you're walking into a school where it's already established, and you're able, it's kind of pre-advocated and everything's there. But in many cases, it's going to be a case of having to fight for one or some of these things on that list to really push the priority of your subject. But what I wanted to say, I know sort of, as Katie's obviously here from the subject leads team, but she will be talking about how the subject leads team, spitting on my words there, will support you. But that support is not exclusive to subject leads. That support is still available to everybody who might be working within a subject area who is taking on a leadership aspect. So don't feel that is, not for you if you're not specifically titled as a subject lead. Being an advocate for your subject is potentially different from this. You're not expected to know everything about your subject, but it's about sharing your enthusiasm and your enjoyment. Things that do overlap with being a subject lead, but elements of subject leadership can really help you with that advocacy. It may well be that you're the only languages teacher in your school, or you're the only person with any languages expertise, and you want to really start being, positive about it. So it's very easy to be, oh, it's really terrible, we haven't got the money, we haven't got the resources, but actually it's being positive about your subject, so being positive about languages for everybody, so it starts to take on that positive mindset. I've referenced some really great blogs and articles in the slides, and as you can see, when you get sent these out after the event, there are links in all of these, so you'll be able to access these articles and read them, and they're really great because they give you some really good perspective on subject leadership and subject advocacy, and how they can be different and overlap, and how you can really work with those. And as Katie's just said in the chat there as well, advocates absolutely support subject leads to drive their subject forward, which is really important. So don't feel that subject leadership resources you don't look at automatically because you're not technically a subject lead, because there may be something in there that can be really helpful to help you drive that subject forward. Similarly, from this same article, there are some great tips here on things to do to actually promote your subject, which is about sharing your enjoyment and your enthusiasm, but also trying to model and encourage positive attitudes in general. So, talking about the positives of languages, and, being open to trying things out. So, if you are lucky enough to be able to chat to other schools and other teams to find out how they're doing it or what they're promoting it. So I live in Wales, and Welsh is a subject which is compulsory, and it can be a real battle for schools because most of the teachers in English medium primary schools don't teach Welsh, but they don't speak Welsh, but they have to teach it, and this can be really daunting, particularly if they're an English, Scottish or Irish or an international teacher who's teaching in a Welsh school and they're having to teach Welsh. It can be really nerve-wracking for them. So they very much understand, the issue of teaching French and Spanish in those. But all schools that you see locally really go for that approach that every sign in the school is bilingual. Everything that you see everywhere, you'll see, little Welsh flashcards all around the school. You will hear answer phone messages in English and in Welsh. You will see signs for the head teacher's door in Welsh. People will try and answer the register in Welsh, throughout the day, and those sorts of things. So it's kind of trialing approaches that work, in other communities as well, and thinking, oh, what could we do here? How could we try to do that? So looking for opportunities to try and develop languages. So, to try and boost that positivity and, having fun with it, really, so that children are quite excited about language learning because they see it as a positive thing in your school. So, just some ideas of how you can start, really. It may be a case, and I appreciate that these are all things that take and add on to your workload. And what's obviously, a busy workload already, it's really hard sometimes to do these things when you're just trying to keep the day going. However, if you're looking at taking on a leadership role, or you're looking to develop your own, performance sort of portfolio and those sorts of things, these can be really fantastic things to think about, or certainly to aim towards, to having, subject documentation and folders to plan for how you really want to promote that subject. And if you have these ideas, if you're battling for time on the timetable already and you feel really passionately about it, then maybe trying to do some of these things can really help support your case to actually show to your head teacher, well, look, this is what I'm doing already. This is how important it is to me. So, starting up a blog, and it could be pupils contributing to that, whether it's sharing people's work or homework. So, pictures of, display work or things that have been done, going into a blog to explain what they've done, or if a song has been sung, then sharing that song and sending it home, for example, sending home copies of authentic materials, etc. Anything that you can do to really kind of promote it and get that out there. I know I went into my own children's school when they were studying a topic on Mexico, and at this point languages were not part of the curriculum in the Welsh curriculum. Before it's since changed, and I remember going in and teaching a little Spanish module to the class throughout the term whilst they were studying all about Mexico. And I found myself in every newsletter, in everything. I was on the app going home, there was me sort of singing and waving flags about with maracas and all of these sorts of things, and kind of promoting that. And they really took that as a springboard to kind of push it, and it did generate some enthusiasm, and it was really nice to do that. So think about those kind of things and how you can kind of reach out and show that. Languages days and events are immense for this, particularly European Day of Languages. And you can focus on a cultural capital aspect. So whether with health and safety you're able to do this, but people bringing food in, or different things, or tastings and those sorts of things is often wonderful. Or different kind of information or culture, or people are presenting about different cultures. Often, I know it's European Day of Languages, but I always see it as a fantastic time to celebrate all languages in the wider school community. So whether if there are parents who speak a language, that they could come in and read a story in the language, or those sorts of things. Anything that really draws the community together and involves them. Reach out to parents, but also reach out to governors. And I'm going to talk a bit more about governors as well, because I have found the most fantastic resource for really pushing this with governors, and I think that's like a really key step for really promoting your subject area. Look out for any free CPD that you can come across, but also keep abreast of any changes and developments. The annual Language Trends report is really important. It's published by the British Council every year, because that talks about the patterns that are seen, how long other schools are spending on languages. So if you're feeling very hard done by, you'll be able to say, look, this is actually the average. We're not having enough. We need to really build up to this. You can really see those sorts of things, and be proactive. Offer to lead at assemblies, or run a staff meeting, or to run a club, or encourage a club, or set up some ambassadors. Look for ways that you could, try to do these things to really promote your subject area. Another great idea, and this obviously, requires a lot of work, but if these things are set up, they can be really, really successful. And there's a great article on sustaining the profile of languages, which is content and language integrated learning lessons. And that's the equivalent of teaching something like geography or history through a foreign language. So really enhancing that. So if you've got a module about history and you're learning about the war, well, can you tie that in with some linked language if you're looking at D-Day landings and Normandy, well, then you tie that in with some related language, or you learn about some culture about the area and you build it up from there. If you're learning about rainforests and geography, then could you learn some key vocabulary to go around that, for example? So you really build it up with those sorts of things. Establishing links with other departments is a really positive thing. You know, it's quite hard to set these up, and they do create a lot of work, but once you've done it, they're often the sorts of resources that can be reused and can be brought back year and year, and that can be a really exciting way to motivate children. And you know, it's really nice to share that with colleagues as well, and really promote languages across the school. Now, this is a great paper that I came across as part of some of my research and preparing for today, which is this fantastic document for governors, which is quite well hidden. It took me a while to come across this, but the link is in the document that will be sent out to you. And this is perhaps, I think, one of the most useful things that is well worth printing out and taking this to the governors at your school, either asking it to be given to the governors or actually asking, well, could I go and speak to the governors meeting and actually go and do this? And I think, you know, I spent years as a parent governor, and I would have absolutely loved to have seen something like this, but it's full of information of how, as a governor, to support your school and questions that you should be asking as a governor, which I think is absolutely brilliant, because actually in a first case, these are a set of questions that you can actually ask yourself and think, well, do we have these? And if you're missing some of these, and you're like, this is the point, I need to take it. So this is a really great thing to share with senior leadership at your school, but also to share with the governors and really to kind of promote that. But there are some fantastic questions to think in here about, you know, set time allocated for languages, cross-curricular links, professional development, you know, as well as how are languages, you know, community home or heritage languages celebrated. I love this question. In what way is the school celebrating the linguistic footprint of the school community? What a fantastic question. So if you can really, you know, encourage that debate and really, you know, challenge the governors to actually, you know, consider this, then I think it's really helpful. You know, transitions mentioned there, mixed age classes is mentioned, you know, our primary languages referenced on the school website. Obviously, most schools will have, you know, the curricula there, but, you know, is it just an afterthought, or is there actually, you know, something that's there with some information, what's there, for example? Oh, yeah, that's great from Katie saying that there. And I think that's it. You know, it's quite a tricky subject. And if you're not a language expert yourself, you just wouldn't know where to go with it. But, you know, it's also got possible ways as a governor that you can support as well. So, you know, it's actually suggesting membership of professional bodies such as the Association of Language Learning. At Twinkl, we're members of this as a team, and they offer loads of great CPD and articles and resources and ways to kind of get involved with the community. So a school membership of a society like that is a really helpful way to start. And, you know, actually meet other people, because they run language hubs and language networks. So while you may not have a local network to work with, you may be able to find a wider network. So, for example, they have subject meeting hubs for primary schools. So they're not sort of a technical hub, you know, it's an online hub basically that anybody can go to, and then people share CPD and share good practice. Well, those are really great ideas. So it may well be that getting your school to help you join something like that would be great. You know, promotional information for parents evening is a great idea. You know, really encouraging, you know, you may be so lucky as to have a governor who can speak another language. Is there something that, you know, they could be a link governor there in that case? You know, is there a governor who's interested in going for that? You know, trying to get their help and really push for that. So I think an article like this is, you know, really, really helpful to kind of push that and help really push the narrative that languages are important. So I think, you know, the governing team and, you know, are going to be really important with actually helping you, you know, push that forward. Another thing as well is to think about parents and how you involve them as well. So there's a great blog from Sylvia Bastow. I really enjoy her blog. She writes an awful lot as an experienced teacher, you know, about different aspects of language learning and the role of parental involvement and how that's really important. You know, it's the classic. How many parents will say, oh, I could never do French, it was too difficult. And, you know, we know that's going to happen, but it's actually trying to instill that enjoyment and that enthusiasm from the start, that there is that, you know, supportive environment, whether it's sending links home, sending videos, sending songs, sending resources, really trying to boost the profile with parents as well, so that children are seeing that positivity from the other side as well. And, you know, within that, she goes on to give some great ideas, you know, and this goes for, other staff members too, but opening communication channels and providing resources, encouraging parents to get involved, offering workshops if needs be. So when children are starting learning a language at primary school, you may want to run an information evening on how parents can support children and what they can do. Really celebrate diversity. So it isn't just about French or Spanish or whatever the language of teaching is, but actually it's about languages and diversity across the whole school community, and really value their input and ask for their input. And I think that's a really important kind of way to go about it as well. Before we move on from there, has anyone got any comments in the chat or anything you'd like to share of your experiences, positives or negatives, or anything that's worked? And we always absolutely love to hear those. So please do pop them in the chat, or if you've got any questions for later, please do pop them in. But I'm going to hand over to Katie now from the Subject Leads team, who's going to talk about the subject lead perspective and how at Twinkl she and her team can support you with really advocating for your subject.
Amazing. Thanks, Bethan. And very much the way I'm looking at it is already being covered by Bethan, but I want to kind of just dip into the impact that you can have as a subject leader, should that be your role, or if you are an advocate who is supporting subject leaders in your setting. I think, not everything we do is about Ofsted and gradings and those kind of things. But one of the key things that's always stuck with me from a webinar they did a couple of years ago was that they want to have conversations with people who are best placed to speak about that subject. Now, we know that all schools, all settings have very different makeups for what subject leadership may look like. It may be an individual, it may be a team, it may be kind of more holistic, it might be SLT involvement. But if you are a subject advocate, if you have that passion and that understanding and that drive to move things forward, you can have that impact and also have that input to these kind of conversations, which, as they're very aware, they may be daunting to some extent, but really celebrate what you do and what your staff and your setting do to push language learning forwards. We're living in a very changing world where people are traveling all over, and having that passion and that drive and that understanding of the importance of languages is so vital and so key. So advocating as a subject leader or a subject team to make sure that entitlement is there and that children are getting access to it is so important. And that's why I started on my side with that obsession with the front line. I think, subject lead seems, I seem to say, many times over across the day, but it is having that obsession with what does your subject need? What do your learners need? What does your setting need? And really thinking about all the different contexts, the different approaches you can use, and creating that culture of effective language leadership. And I think that's so important. It's, as a subject lead, you are an intentional enabler. It's not that, oh, look, we've done really well with languages this year because we've had one celebration day. No, it's what have you put in place to enable that love of language, that fostering that culture where it's celebrated, it's taught progressively, accurately, at a high level, consistently. All those issues that we know come into play. And Bethan mentioned earlier about kind of, there's no tables, there's no, the hall's being used for something else. It happens all the time, and we know that's kind of the realities of school. But I think if you have the intent behind as a subject lead to go, this is what we need to do, this is how I want to do it, and this is how I want to drive culture in my context, you really are, being that advocate for your subject and for what your community needs. As a subject leader, one of my favorite things to kind of keep in the back of my mind is why this, why now? And I think no more, this is just as prevalent in language learning as it is in every subject. Why are you delivering this piece of learning? Why are you doing it in this way, and why at this particular point? So thinking about what your children need, what your context says, things that are going on in the world, like we've said about celebration days, things like that, and really having that at the forefront of everything that you do is so important. If you can lead with that why, if you can say, the purpose behind, you will get everybody's buy-in. People will support what you're doing, the reasoning why, whether that be SLT, whether that be governors, whether that be parents who don't really understand why they have to learn another language on top of everything else potentially. And I think it's important to remember championing at all levels for all. So it's thinking about all the stakeholders. So you're championing languages, like we said, to your support staff, to your parents, with your children, so they have that love of learning, with your SLT who are going, we can't do French this week because X, Y, and Z needs to be covering something else, advocating for that. Then with your governors, but at all the different levels as well, the CPD, the environment, the events, that progressive teaching, that's support that you're putting in place as a subject leader. I think that's so important. So championing the why are you doing it? What's the purpose? It's really hard to argue when you have a why. If it's just, oh, I've seen this really good thing on Twitter and this resource looks great. What impact is it going to make for your subject, the subject that you lead? I think it's always really important for subject leaders to remember that you need to showcase, not scrutinize your subject. And that's applicable for all subjects, but very much so for languages, in something that it may not be natural to many people. They may not have a specialism in languages. They may not be confident in the delivery of languages, depending on their experience and their background and their CPD. But the purpose of driving subjects forward and kind of evaluating where that subject is to showcase where you are now at, celebrating the achievements and what you want to do next. Not, well, this is terrible, this doesn't work. Really think about what have we achieved and where do we want to go next, backing it up with that why. Perfection is not expected in any subject. It's the understanding what comes next. Why does it look like it does? Why are you doing what you're doing? And what do you want to achieve? I just think that's so important to keep in the back of your head. The why, and you are showcasing and promoting the love of the culture of this the subject that you're leading in your setting. So yeah, to back that up, celebrate what you do. Really be, okay, using that term, advocate, and make it visible. Use your social media streams or whatever it is you use in your school setting, newsletters, raising awareness with parents, but the reason why it's important that they study this, it's not just a nice to have, it's a need to have, and it's part of the curriculum entitlement. And therefore, you're empowering people at all levels to have that confidence, where they may be a little bit nervous delivering something that may not be their first language, but it gives them that confidence to give it a go. And isn't that what we want from children? To be confident, to give things a go. So we want to empower our whole community, whether that's the parents, the governors, the SLT, to buy into your delivery of the subject of languages. But yeah, Twinkl Subject Leads is passionate about empowering you to lead subjects your way. We have our own landing page and socials where you can find leadership resources, curriculum planning and engaging activities for whatever it is that you lead. So please come and check out what we're up to. If you've ever any questions, and we can support you to have that confidence and work with different stakeholders, please reach out. We'd be more than happy to help. And if there are any questions and things that you'd like to know about, please just either pop them in the comments or we can ask at the end. Back over to you, Bethan.
Thank you, Katie. That's brilliant. And Katie sends out regular subject leads newsletters, don't you? If you mentioned that there, and that's a really great one to sign up for, because it may well be something that you see on Twinkl and think, oh, well, I'm not a subject lead, I'm not going to sign up for that. But actually, the content of that is really relevant for you with your subjects, because you can link and go to those and find out about things that are happening within subjects, finding out about events such as CPD or new resources or things that can really help you. So I would definitely encourage you to sign up for those, because they can be really, really helpful for you.
Thanks, Bethan.
Brilliant. Thank you. If anyone's got any questions or comments, as usual, please do put them in the chat. But now I'm going to hand over to Maz from the languages team, who's going to talk a little bit about the languages perspective in terms of advocating for your subject.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bethan. And I'm going to try not to kind of regurgitate too much of what Katie and Bethan have already said, but there will be a lot of kind of overlap. So my history is that I've always been around languages. I grew up in a kind of bilingual family with parents who were language teachers. My gran was an immigrant who spoke, 2 languages. My husband is from another country, so speaks another language. So to me, languages are something that are really kind of embedded in what I do. So I find it really easy to advocate for languages, but I haven't always been a language leader, a languages leader within my career. I have had times when I've had to lead other subjects. And so some of what I'm going to talk about now will be from my experience of having to advocate for other subjects as well, and what you can do to kind of facilitate that process, because you really do need to make sure that you as a subject lead are the person that is really kind of showing off that love of your subject, because if you can't do it, then you can't expect anybody else in your school community to do it. So starting off, one piece of advice I'd have for you is to know your audience, know your community. And we've talked about this before, but how receptive is your community to languages? You can have schools that are in areas that are really ethnically diverse, and so therefore being able to kind of articulate the need for languages and the need for language learning can be a lot easier, whereas there are other areas of the country and of your community where perhaps, you know, there aren't other languages spoken. You need to know your audience, you need to know who's in your community, you need to know what sort of families, you need to know whether they travel, whether they don't, whether your children have been ever, you know, outside of your literally your kind of really local environment. Do they get to see other people and places? Because if you know that, then you'll know what you're advocating for. You know, what sort of languages do your staff teach? Do you have any staff expertise? You know, are there people on your staff that do already speak other languages that you can enlist to help you? Who are the people you're going to need to convince? Are there people in your staff team that are really dead set against languages being included in the curriculum? Those might be the people that you need to break first, so to speak, because if you can get them on your side, then you know you're onto some quick wins there. I would also say that your time is really, really precious. So getting that enlisting your community and getting that kind of really real feel for who you're talking to is really going to help, because you may well, by doing that, kind of, you know, scoping out your community and what their needs are, you may well find that you've got some people who can advocate for you. A really good example is way back years and years ago, actually. We had a week where we were just looking at lots and lots of different languages across our community, and I had a friend who spoke Arabic, and he said, why don't I come into school and teach some Arabic? And it was really great because it just showed children that you know, there was something different that they can learn. And obviously, like, the way Arabic's written is really beautiful and artistic, and that got some children involved from that point of view as well. So, you know, you had this real enthusiasm, and we had different people from the community teaching across the school in different classes, so they all went home at the end of the day with an experience that they could share. And that kind of real enthusiasm and kind of bubbly chatter about languages at the end of the day was absolutely beautiful. So, you know, who can you get that you can enlist to come in and talk and come in and share, because those things can be really quick wins. Parents, you know, do you have bilingual parents? Do you have parents from different communities? Can you chat to them at the end of the day and ask if they, you know, would like to come in and share? Some will, some won't. Some children don't like their parents coming into school, so you know, that's something else to consider, that those kind of sensitivities. But if you know who is willing to do what, then you may find that you have more people on your side than you kind of originally thought. The next one is about knowing your why. So why a language is important. If you can't articulate that, then you're going to struggle when other people are asked to articulate that. For example, you know, and we talked about an Ofsted scenario, or you know, times when governors come in, you need to know why languages are important. We have loads of you know, some really great resources within Twinkl. We've had some blogs about why start a language young, all of those kind of, you know, the research behind it, the transferable skills. So you may learn one language and then you can use it to learn another language. My 14-year-old son wants to go and live in Canada when he's older, and wants to live in Quebec specifically. And so his you know, enthusiasm for learning French so they can go and do that, it might be that he's learning Spanish at school, but if you learn one language, you can learn another language much more easily. It actually helps with your English in many ways. A lot of the grammar I learned for teaching year 6 English, I knew that from my languages background. So it actually, you know, there's loads of research there about transferable skills from learning languages, but also just in terms of, you know, the global community and being able to make friends and travel and all of those things are really, really important. That kind of breaking down barriers, getting to know people. There's loads of research there. So you need to know the why. You need to have those arguments. You need to know the arguments that are pertinent to your community, the specifics for your community, so that you can use your local context to explain your curriculum, because I know that's, like, you know, a really key part of tailoring your curriculum for your community. So in addition to that, I think you need to be the one, I've said it before, to live and breathe the love for your subject. And kind of added to that, I would say, as I've written there, fake it till you make it. If you can't do it yet, if you don't love your subject yet, just pretend you do. You want to be the one that when you walk into the staff room, or any sort of community areas in your class, in your school, people go, oh no, she's going to talk to me about languages again, because you want to be the one that talks about that all the time until you really feel that it's embedded and you understand it. So for me, I was asked to take on maths, which is not my natural home. And I was maths lead for 8 years and did like some really great kind of things with it. It wasn't something that was my natural subject to lead. So I just went on and on and on about it. I've written there CPD, CPD, CPD. I made sure I knew my subject. I signed up to every course going. I, read kind of research in the background. I know your time is precious, but in that case, just find some, really, really quick wins. Things like social media is great for those really quick wins. So I follow someone on social media that's a French primary school teacher who just gives like every day a little grammar update. And so that's just 2 minutes CPD that I check, and I can see kind of that development day in, day out. So who are the people that you can follow on social media, the blogs you can read? Bethan, you talk a lot, don't you, about kind of coffee time CPD, so just reading through something quickly, bookmarking it, coming back till later if that's helpful to you. So all of those things, just keep learning until you really do understand your subject and you can talk about it with authority. CPD with a cup of tea. Yeah. So the next thing I've said is language is important. And I don't mean which language you choose. I mean, the way you speak about your subject is really, really important, because you need to say things like, wow, we get to teach French and Spanish here. Or you want the children saying, when we get to year 3, we get to do languages and it's really exciting. What you don't want people going around saying, oh, we have to teach French. Oh, we have to teach Spanish. We have to. We get to. We are really lucky that in this school, we get to do this. The way you talk about it, your body language, your kind of tone of voice as you're talking about your subject really make a difference. You want people to say, wow, they really love their subject. What is it about their subject that makes them that enthusiastic? So try really hard to kind of consciously kind of self-assess. Am I making it sound fun? Am I making it sound important? Am I making it sound interesting? Am I putting people off by going, oh, I've got this to do and it's a real drag? You want to kind of show that you're the person that embodies that love of your subject. Subject ambassadors, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but so if you've looked around the community and you know that there are people that are willing to take up this cause for you, can you do the same with the children? So for example, do you have a child in your class that already speaks a language, a community language, another home language? Do you have children that just seem to, I don't know, have an affinity for learning languages? Do you have those children that just really just enjoy it and want to go out and share that with others? So can you get them to go and visit a class? Can you get some year 3s who have just started potentially learning a language, if that's the setup in your school? Can you get them to go down to year 2 and talk about the subject to get the children excited? Because then you'll find they're going home at the end of the day going, oh, well, this child came and they told us this, and look, I can say my name and introduce myself in this language now. So getting the children involved. Children love a job to do, to go and be responsible and to go and share things with others. So get them going out around the school fighting for your subject for you, and that is just a really quick way of just spreading those ripples of enjoyment and enthusiasm. I have said there, be prepared to fight. You have to arm yourself with all those arguments that Bethan and Katie spoke about earlier. So if there are no table and chairs, if there is no curriculum time, if the language is the first thing to go off the timetable, if you don't have the resources, if you don't have the bilingual dictionary, you don't have the display boards to put up evidence of your subject, if you don't have those things, then do be prepared to fight for them, because they are important. And we've said before that it is an entitlement to learn a language. It is part of the primary curriculum. It is statutory, so you should be allowed those things. You should have a budget, or even if it's a tiny weeny one, you should have the resources that you need to teach your subject. So be prepared to advocate for them in that respect as well, by saying, well, actually, we are, our children are entitled to learn this, so we need to make sure that we're teaching it effectively. And finally, just to gather up all the positives, I think Katie said this earlier, having a display board just inside the reception area as you come into school with, the language day photos on, or, something on a screen. I know the school I was teaching at had a screen as you came in with that flashed up different things that have been happening in the school, the newsletters, all of those things. Posters in classroom windows sharing what you've learned in your subject. This week's French vocabulary is this. Can you make a sentence with this so that your parents can see it as they stand waiting at the end of the day? All of those things, just to prove that it's happening, and to show that it's valued, because the more value we give it, and the more evidence that we gather and demonstrate to our community, the more people buy into things and want to be involved. So just some ideas there that perhaps you can use to really advocate strongly for languages in your school. Thanks.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Maz. And I'm really pleased, in fact, that Maz has just spoken to you, because I wanted to take the time. Again, if you do have any comments or questions, please do pop them in the chat, because I wanted to finish off just by showing you our scheme, Lightning Languages. And Maz has been absolutely instrumental in the development of this. And I hope you can see just how much her genuine passion for languages shines through. And not just her passion for languages, but also her deep rooted knowledge of pedagogy and actually understanding of what teachers need, which is why, I'm so proud to be able to share this scheme with you, because, we are extremely proud of it within our team. And, I'm in a very lucky position within the languages team that Maz is not the only colleague like this. We have other colleagues who also have that expertise, that passion, that enthusiasm, who have that languages background, and they have really brought this to this scheme. So this is our new scheme, which is designed to replace Planet French and Planet Spanish, which some of you may be familiar with and may have used in the past. And the idea behind this scheme is that it is a more flexible approach to language teaching, because we know that, all things being equal, if you had an hour a week, then marvelous, you can teach a linear progressive curriculum, and that's brilliant. But the reality is, getting that hour a week for languages, no matter how much you advocate, can be tricky. So we wanted to build together a flexible scheme that could still ensure meeting curriculum expectations, even if you're pushed for time, and even if you've got 20 minutes or half an hour here and there, and how you can build a topic together and build that. So we've got a real focus on sentence building as part of that. So we're really building communication skills and developing that linguistic knowledge to keep reinforcing and keep building, on that knowledge for French or Spanish. So I just want to show you a little bit about that scheme if you've not already had a chance to look. We have core units for the equivalent of Key Stage 2, which is called Lift Off. And for the equivalent of upper Key Stage 2, which is called In Orbit. And I say the equivalent of, because the most important thing to me about this scheme is that it's for language learners wherever you're learning a language. Because the reality is, once you start looking into the English National Curriculum, the Scottish National Curriculum, various Australian province curriculums or Canadian curriculums, the fundamental purpose of primary languages is the same. We want children to build communication skills in reading, writing, listening and speaking, to develop their skills in phonics, grammar and vocabulary, and to embed cultural capital. And that is the same wherever we're teaching languages. So I wanted our scheme to reflect that and not just be labelled Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3. I wanted it to be accessible to anybody teaching languages, because, as Maz said, with her own background, we are an international team, and we believe very, very strongly in accessing our resources to deliver a comprehensive curriculum. So within a unit, you'll find such a wealth of resources that you can build. You've got core PowerPoints that will fulfill your curriculum expectations. But if you want to go a step beyond that, there are videos, there are interactive games, there are ebooks, there are sentence building packs, there's an activity booklet. There are steps there that you can put together to create an hour a week if you have it, or half an hour 3 times a term if that's all you've got, and you can still put together a comprehensive curriculum that you can get behind and feel important, feel is important and is delivering correct value to your learners. And also we feel these are really attractive and appealing resources, and we feel quite strongly that they will really help you advocate for languages within your school. We've got a lovely introductory guide that sets it out and gives you some information, so the links will all be here in this document that's sent out to you. We've got taster packs for French and Spanish that showcase some of our resources, and we've also got a progression map that highlights how we actually progress at the moment against the curricula in Scotland, Ireland, Wales and England, so how we actually meet those steps and how we work towards them. We're also extremely excited because our colleagues in Australia are currently developing Lightning Languages in Indonesian, and they plan to be developing it in Japanese and German as well. And it's also being taught in the core French market with our French resources as well. So we're really excited about the international focus of this scheme and how it's really capturing language learners internationally, which I think is a really exciting thing for us all within the team. We've also got, as part of that, this is non-statutory in England, but slightly different depending on where else you may teach. But we have resources for under 7s, so the equivalent of early years or Key Stage 1, for example, which are very short 15-minute lessons where you can actually deliver little bursts of language learning on really cute, fun topics with lovely characters. So these are really ideal for introducing a language as well. If you're looking for resources to help advocate and to help push, to celebrate a different language, or, to start up a little languages club, or to start delivering languages earlier in the school, you can see that we've got our really cute characters. There are 4 of them here who are sort of balloon alien creatures, and they're super cute, and they go on all sorts of little language learning adventures. So they're really beautiful resources and really lovely for introducing a language. We've delivered CPD on how you can start introducing a language earlier, which is great for advocating for your subject. And we do have lots of resources that you can find on this as well. Within the packs for younger learners, you will find a set of PowerPoints, and they're all filled with songs. We've got lovely songs. We've also got some ebooks, really cute interactive games, a lovely activity booklet, and an adult pack that brings it all together. So these are really lovely resources for any setting. And, even though they are designed for under 7s, they can still be used, to boost languages at any point for a fun sort of language burst, or if you wanted to introduce a second language, for example, if you're feeling particularly ambitious. As you can see, the PowerPoints are packed with really cute resources and characters, and they're got a real focus on communication. So it's all about singing and chanting and repeating and playing games with the language. And obviously packed with interactive games and display packs to help you really build a language-rich environment, as well as lots of songs and videos as well. So we're really proud of them. We think they're really lovely. But, our Lightning Languages scheme for compulsory age learners, our Lift Off and Languages, our Lift Off and In Orbit schemes, it's something that we're working on all the time within the team. We feel very strongly that it's a really excellent way to help really encourage language learning within your school and really build a strong profile to meet any observation or inspection requirements, but also to have fun with the language, to promote culture, because we've got culture videos within every unit. We're promoting the 3 pillars of phonics, grammar and vocabulary. We have videos in every unit to help focus on this. So if you're not an experienced teacher, the videos are there. The videos are also great because you could send those home for parents to watch with children. There are songs in the units for the lower Key Stage 2 children and for Key Stage 1 children. There are ebooks, and these are all resources that could be sent home. Our booklets can be made up, and these could also be sent home, so you could, send those out to really help, create that profile within your school community, really, which is the ideal thing. If anybody would like to find out more about the scheme and how we can help you, we do offer obviously one-to-one appointments on that to help you kind of talk through how you could make it work if you've got a mixed age setting, or if you've got reduced curriculum time, or those sorts of things. We're really happy to sit with you and help work out how you could fit that in. So do get in touch either via our social media or through the feedback form. You could put a message there and I'll get in touch with you, or please just pop a message in the chat and I'm happy to get in touch and discuss that with you and how we can support you with integrating our curriculum into your school, and indeed hopefully really advocating for languages as a part of it. So that's it from me for now, but thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. You can find Lightning Languages just by very simply typing it into the search bar at Twinkl. There's the address, which I've obviously put in the chat, or by finding it via curriculum planning as well. You can find it there, or via the Key Stage 2 page. So they're quite straightforward to find. So, do have a look at all of our resources, and very much hope to see you. That's the range of our CPD sessions. Some obviously we've had already this year, but recordings of all of those are available on site for any that you've missed. And that's what's coming for the rest of the year. So the next one that we've got in March is on progression and assessment within our scheme. I'm also doing a TeachMeet on the 17th in conjunction with the TAs from Twinkl on supporting languages as a TA. So there may be some members of your team that may be interested in that. But obviously, if you're interested in any of those, you'll be able to sign up to any of those for our free CPD that comes on that. And if you've got any ideas for future CPD for our programme, please, again, do put that in the feedback form. It's really helpful for us and it helps us shape our programme for next year. But a huge thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I'll hand back over to you, Helen. Thank you as well. Massive thank you to Maz and Katie for joining me and for sharing their wisdom and insights. I'm really grateful as always.